So I'm quickly approaching the 3-year anniversary of our family's transition and move to the West African country of Sierra Leone. And during those 3 years, I believe I'm gaining a better perspective and awareness of what are the largest dangers to the ministry of preaching the gospel abroad, of making disciples of all nations. And so I want to talk about one of those dangers today, and that is the danger of pride and how pride can spoil the ministry of teaching the gospel abroad. So let's talk about that. Hello, welcome to the channel. My name is Dan. If this is your first time coming to the channel, this is just a channel where I get to upload some of my thoughts and share some of the lessons learned of preaching the gospel and living abroad in the West African country of Sierra Leone. Some of these things are just interesting observations that I just want to pass along, but my ultimate goal is that some of these videos that I upload might be helpful or encouraging to those hoping to do the same in whatever capacity they're able. And today we're talking about pride, and I don't think I'll be able to share everything I want to in a single video, so this might be a two-parter. Today I simply want to talk about very briefly what is pride, and then what makes the mission field such a dangerous place for missionaries, Christians, evangelists, developing pride while working and preaching here in environments like this. And so briefly, I want to talk a little bit about pride and what really is pride. What is this enemy? What is this danger fundamentally? And a kind of a brief explanation. Pride is really a distorted or inaccurate or false view of self. Pride is really built upon lies and deceit that Satan's trying to get us to believe. That we've done more, we've accomplished more, we're more important, or it goes the other way around, that we really aren't nothing, we don't have any skills and talents to contribute, we're never going to amount to anything else. All those things is a focus of self and really are inaccurate and untruthful perceptions of self. Whereas if we see things the way they really are, that God is supreme and I am a servant of His, empowered by His grace, then that is really what humility is. So if pride is a perception of self that is built upon lies, then humility, on the other hand, is a perception that is accurate, that is totally truthful. I mean, that's the only way that we could properly understand how Jesus was humble. It wasn't that Jesus thought he was scum or that he wasn't good at anything. That's not what humility is. Humility is seeing yourself accurately and truthful. So with that brief and probably overly simplistic definition of pride, I want to talk a little bit about how I feel like most third world and underdeveloped country environments can really be a dangerous place for Christians to go if they are not protecting and guarding their hearts against pride. The type of realities that most foreign missionaries will face, especially those that come from the Western world, is that in most local environments, you will be seen as someone that everyone wants to talk to. I've experienced that where it's an awkward reality, but when there's a room full of locals and natives, when I walk into the room, everyone looks at me. Everyone sees me as probably the most odd, but probably the more accurate way of saying it is the most interesting person in that room. Immediately, I'm the person that people want to talk to. I'm the person that people would love to be their friend. And they have a bunch of reasons behind that. Not all of them are completely noble and altruistic. But that's the reality, is that I now live in a society and in a culture where everyone finds me as being interesting, being cool, and someone that they want to connect with. And that's certainly something that Satan could use to have me focus on, to make me think things about myself that are not true, that somehow I'm super cool, I'm super likable, I'm the most, important person in a room. These are all things that Satan could use to really bolster and puff me up, to get me a big head and to think about myself in an inaccurate way. Another reality that I think you'll find is pretty common is that most people will want to hear your opinion on things. That'll happen very frequently in various Bible study environments that you're at or church meeting environments. that immediately when there's a question that's brought up, a lot of heads will swivel to your direction because they want to hear what you have to say about it. And in part, that's not a terrible, inaccurate perspective to have. That one of the reasons you decided to move to an underdeveloped place is because there was a lack of understanding regarding God's word and how he thinks and what he wants done. And so when there are questions that raise up, it makes sense that your opinion is sought out, since you, in all seriousness and reality, probably know more about the Bible than the people that are asking you to speak up. But again, that is something that Satan could use to really distort your perspective of self. I mean, it'd be very easy and natural, unfortunately, for you to stop preparing, stop growing in your knowledge of the Bible, to become puffed up and prideful and thinking that you have all the answers and suddenly that your opinion matters most. Simply because you have maybe a different opinion than most does not mean that opinion is right, or that you don't need to say, I don't know, in certain situations, or that you don't need to do further study on some of those subjects. Again, that's an aspect of the environment that you're going to be in that I think very easily, if not guarded against, could lead to pride. But unfortunately, some of those dangers and pitfalls of pride are not just something that are limited to these foreign environments. If you decide to preach the gospel abroad, either for short-term trips or you decide to move there on a permanent basis like my family has, when you go back to the U.S., so when you're talking to your American brethren, well-intentioned brethren will say things that, if not guarded against, could lead to you buying into and thinking more highly of yourself than what you ought to think. Again, these are comments said by well-intentioned, well-meaning, encouragingly motivated people, but remarks regarding, wow, we're so thankful that you're doing it. We could never do that. You're special. You're made of different stuff. And when you hear that so often by American brethren, it would be just too easy for me just to think, wow, that is true. I really am one in a million. I really am the only one willing to do something like that. I really am special because I'm willing to leave the comforts and conveniences of my home and do this. And that, again, could present a foundation for Satan to build a false view of myself within my own mind. And maybe related to that, no, I think those of you who have grown up in the U.S. like myself, we're also kind of trained with this accepted amount of patriotism regarding the American way that tells us and makes us feel very comfortable believing that America is the best and that America knows how to do things. And when we take that perspective with us to foreign fields, when we're preaching the gospel and building up our brethren, that could lead to pride. Whenever there's a problem, whenever there's a dilemma, whenever there's a barrier, and we suggest a solution, and the solution that we suggest is, well, in America, we did this. In America, we did that. And really what it is it's assuming that the way that we do things in America is the best way and the right way, and that's how these churches in West Africa, South America, Asia need to do them, which is just totally the wrong reason. I mean, maybe there are some things that we've learned in the U.S. that we could share with our brethren abroad, but let's make it very clear that just because we do it in the U.S. does not mean it's right or that it should be copied or imitated. The better thing to do is to show in the Bible where those things originate from and teach it from there. I can think of very few scenarios where it's helpful for me to say, well, in the U.S. we do this. Again, I think that's a prideful way of looking at it, kind of assuming that, well, because I'm from the U.S. and after all, the U.S. only knows how to do things the best way, therefore, what we do is the way that you all need to imitate. Is this a dangerous and kind of prideful way of thinking? And that kind of perspective and patriotic mentality, I think, is a prideful one. So no matter how much Satan would love to use the environmental circumstances of my local work in a foreign field, by how locals treat me, or even the words or the influences of Americans and American brethren, more than any of that, I think what he would like to use and what he has most persistently tried to use to get me to think more prideful regarding myself and my work is the voices that I say to myself, my inner workings and my inner thoughts within my head, my motivations for things. And these are all, I'm going to list a few of these things that come up that I have personally experienced and I have certainly had to take a step back from. And these are perspectives that I think are false but Satan, again, would love for me just to buy into and say, yeah, that's real. One of those is that, wow, how come I'm the only one doing this? Now, that's a false thing. I'm not the only one doing it. But there can be a resentment that is developed within me because I feel so passionate about making disciples of all nations and leaving your home and preaching the gospel abroad that I somehow develop a frustration and an annoyance regarding my brethren that refuse to make that same choice as me. Not realizing that we're all part of the same body, not realizing that we all have a role to play, and my role is this, and it's right that I feel passionate about this, but just because of that doesn't mean that my work's any more important than anyone else's. But instead, I disregard that, and I think mostly about how important my work is and how come no one else has the devotion or the zeal or the faith in order to do the same thing I'm doing. Again, that's just plain false, just a lie, if I allow myself to believe that. Another aspect related to that is me thinking that I'm more important and essential to this work than what I really am. I mean, it becomes so easy for me to feel like because I don't know of many other people doing this type of work, relatively speaking, that I am somehow more vital to God's work and God's ministry than what I really am. Not realizing that God has a plethora of resources and influences at his disposal beyond me, and I'm just a small little cog in that workings. Instead, I can view myself as being essential, irreplaceable, just a complete, force in God's kingdom that God wouldn't know what to do if I wasn't around doing it. Again, I cringe thinking that, but sometimes our own thoughts can feed those lies and give that energy and give that foundation when it really shouldn't. But then there's other self-talk that creates pride in a different way, and I'm talking about insecurity, where instead of me thinking I'm super important and super essential, instead I think about all the time about how incapable I am, how unqualified I am, how I'm not able to do this work as well as it needs to be done. Feeling like it's all up to me, but yet I don't have the resources or I don't have the abilities, I don't have the experience to do all of this. What is that? That's not true. God has given me everything I need to be pleasing to him and to do the work that he's given me to do. But what I can tell myself is that I'm not good enough. I can compare myself to other people. I can feel insecure regarding that work, and that can even distract me from the good work I'm able to do. But again, those kind of insecure feelings, insecure thoughts are not based upon reality and truth, but upon a lie. And so even though we might not at first identify that as being pride, it really is. So I hope this video can kind of be an eye-opening one for seeing the danger for pride in those who would go overseas to preach the gospel, to make disciples. And so I'm going to upload another video pretty soon about what are some of the safeguards and things that we can remind ourselves of to protect us from pride. And so I'll be looking at a few different scriptures that have been really helpful to me in keeping myself centered on truth when it comes to my perspective of myself and my work that I'm involved in. But I hope at least this video kind of opens our eyes to that and really gives us a priority to make sure we're guarding ourselves against this great danger. I'll catch you in the next video.